not finished yet. Good evening, alumni, students, and friends of Course 15. I haven't met some of you yet. My name is Dave Schmidtlein, and I'm Dean of MIT's Sloan School of Management. Welcome as we celebrate 100 years of management at MIT. Let's begin with a toast to you, your families, and to MIT in the celebration of its centenary of management education. Cheers. Course 15 began in 1914. And so this academic year, we are commemorating this important period in MIT's history with gatherings like this one around the country and around the world. And those lead up to a convocation in June on reunion weekend this year. And I hope many of you will be able to participate in that gathering as well. This evening, we're going to take a look back at the origins of Course 15. We'll celebrate some of the faculty, legends, past and present. We'll look at some of the school's activities, talk about what's changed, what hasn't changed, and maybe some of the things that should never change. I hope this evening's an opportunity for each of you to reflect a little bit on what has mattered most to you about management at MIT, either during your time at MIT or if you're alumni, perhaps in the years since. And I'm going to ask a couple of the school's alumni to say just a few words about what Course 15, what management at MIT has meant to them. I think if you want to understand Course 15 well, it's important to go back to the beginning. And by the beginning, I mean the beginning of MIT itself. Starting with the legendary, visionary founding president of MIT, William Barton Rogers. William Barton Rogers, in the spring of 1861, brought a charter for a new kind of university to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts' legislature. I want to show you a little bit of the text that describes what MIT was to be and is still today. MIT is supposed to be a school of industrial science. That's what it is. That's what its charter says it's supposed to be. And what's the industrial science for? It's in order to advance the arts, agriculture, manufactures, and commerce. That's the purpose of MIT. It's totally unique. In 1861, no other American educational institution had a purpose like this one. President Rogers had a three-point plan to achieve these objectives for MIT. First, useful knowledge. I have to tell you, in 1861, other universities were not working on useful knowledge. Some of them since as well. Second, the second part of William Barton Rogers' plan, learning by doing. Action learning, experiential learning in 1861. Totally new in American education. And third, the integration of arts and sciences education with education in the professions. Also antithetical to what was happening at other leading universities. This is the vision that William Barton Rogers had for all of MIT. Starting a university is not easy, and serving as the founding president took a toll on President Rogers' health. And in 1882, on the podium at graduation, in his speech to the graduates, President Rogers died. Honestly. There aren't many people outside the military who could say that they gave their life for an idea that mattered to them. That is part of the founding truth for MIT. Just in time, he had attracted to MIT a successor who shared his distinct vision. That successor was Francis Amasa Walker. By the way, you know Walker Memorial on Memorial Drive next to the tennis courts? How many people go past Walker Memorial? That's the memorial to Francis Amasa Walker, who succeeded William Barton Rogers. Walker's areas of expertise as president of MIT were statistics, political science, and economics. And he felt that it was important to continue this vision of useful knowledge from a school of industrial science. But when he went to attract faculty from other universities, they kept turning MIT back into the places that they had come from. So he knew as president that he needed to attract the leader from among the faculty to drive forward that distinct vision as MIT was growing. So in 1886, Francis Amasa Walker, as president, hired a young economist from Johns Hopkins, whose name is Davis Dewey. You know Dewey Library, the Sloan Collections? That's the memorial to Davis Dewey. Dewey was charismatic. He shared this vision, and he became a leader within MIT's faculty and beyond. In fact, he served as president of the American Economic Association. It was Davis Dewey, at President Walker's request, who pushed forward the idea that management needed to be a programmatic part of MIT because that was central to William Barton Rogers' vision. And he kept pushing that vision until, in 1914, the faculty of MIT finally approved Course 15. I think it's important to understand what Course 15 was. What it was is part of this cornerstone, this foundation for MIT broadly. Course 15 isn't something that hung off the end of the org chart. It's central to what MIT is supposed to be. I think it's also important to understand what Course 15 isn't. It didn't result from the instinct to do something different. If you look at the other leading schools of management, schools of business, each of them came from an impulse by that university to do something else, something not central to its purpose. In Northwestern University, not to pick on a school, if you went to Northwestern, it's a lovely place. But in 1908, Northwestern University decided to teach something different, business, to a different group of people, businessmen, business people, downtown in Chicago, far away from the Evanston campus, for extra tuition revenue. And those programs became the Kellogg School of Management. Similarly, in 1881, Joseph Wharton needed accountants for his mining operations to tally up how much iron ore was being carried out of the ground. And he wanted universities to train those accountants, and he offered a variety of universities money if they would teach different people something else. And eventually the University of Pennsylvania took him up on that offer. Doing something else. Course 15 at MIT is not something else. It's part of what MIT centrally is all about. And I hope you think as well that that matters for how we understand not just Course 15, but how we understand MIT. As Course 15 developed, Davis Dewey was the founding head of Course 15. And there were two main characteristics in those years after 1914. First, Course 15 wasn't an island. It was well integrated with the rest of MIT. MIT's legendary president, James Killian, was himself a graduate of MIT's undergraduate program. And he described the best course that he ever took as an undergrad at MIT is a course in Course 15 taught by Davis Dewey. The relationships between economics and management were strong, but other relationships around campus were strong as well. And the perspectives from deep analytics, a deep engagement with the scientific method, were carried across campus and were part, right from the beginning, of the way that management was understood and the way that management principles and methods were developed. There was a second characteristic as Course 15 developed, and that is that those same three disciplinary backgrounds that Francis Amasa Walker brought to MIT were the way that the school and its faculty were organized then and are still organized today. We have an area within Sloan, within Course 15, that's described as mathematics and statistics. We have another area around humanities and social sciences, and we have a third in economics and finance. That legacy is also important. There is a sense that what we do today carries on the very best of the ideas that people had going before us. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about some of the legendary faculty, and I think those three academic divisions are a convenient place to start in touching on some of the legends as Course 15 at MIT arrived. If we start with mathematics and statistics, a great place to start is with J. Forrester. On the top left of the chart that you have here, J. Forrester founded a new field, system dynamics. And he mentored hundreds of people around the country and around the world who were the designers and redesigners of complex socio-technical systems. On the top right, okay, who knows who's on the top right? Who is on the top right? That's Arnie Barnett. How many people have taken a course with Arnie Barnett? Yeah, Arnie's market share in alumni gatherings is always at least 50%. It doesn't matter how old or how young the group is. As you know, Arnie is the world's leading authority with respect to aviation safety. You also know that Arnie has been too much in the news this last week, but we're proud of Arnie's thought leadership as well as his amazing teaching skills. And the third person in this group, the lower picture here, who's that? Who knows who that is? That's John Little. So John Little developed the most fundamental theorem explaining the way that workflows and supply chains operate, fittingly enough, called Little's Law. John also is the first person to use big data in marketing on customer transaction histories to predict future purchases, ushering in that era of mass customization and big data in the marketing area. If we move to social sciences and humanities, Course 15 as it developed also had leaders and legends. On the left of the group that you see is Douglas Mcgregor. So up until Douglas Mcgregor's work, people within organizations were viewed simply as factors of production to be made more and more efficient. And Mcgregor is the first to show that the motivations that people have as social beings has a huge effect on how productive they're actually going to be. Now, that's not a radical concept today, but much of what we understand as management of people at work draws a straight line from a change in understanding people in the organization that Douglas Mcgregor stimulated. His theory why overturned that sense of people just being factors in production. At the bottom of this quartet is Ed Schein. Ed is the person who developed the phrase and developed the disciplinary understanding of corporate culture. Everybody who goes around talking about corporate culture, Marissa Mayer, when she talks about changing the corporate culture at Yahoo, is talking about Ed Schein. At the top of this group, who's that? Everybody knows Ed Roberts, the father of entrepreneurship at MIT, maybe in the world, I don't know. But the mentor of certainly thousands of successful MIT-based startups. And on the right here, Professor Tom Allen. Tom is the first person to show that place matters. Where you sit when you work, where you sit in the organization when you eat lunch, drives the patterns of information flow and drives the patterns of innovation in organizations. Like these others, he opened up an entirely new area of study. If we move finally to the area of economics and finance, you have to begin in the top left with Professor Modigliani. Franco Modigliani left fascist Italy in 1939 at the age of 21. He made his way across Europe, eventually to the United States, and eventually to a professorship at MIT Sloan. He served MIT in that professorship for 41 years until his death in 2003. Many of you know that he received the Nobel Prize for his work on the pattern of household savings and investments through their life cycle of investing. He's also the co-author of the Modigliani-Miller theorem, still taught today, that explains when equity financing has the same or a different effect on companies than debt financing. There will be a quiz on this afterward in the lobby. We'll see how well you do on that. Frankel was not just a theoretician, he was practical. He designed a new kind of credit card. He fought against changes to patent law that would have disadvantaged inventors. On the top right is Fisher Black. So Fisher was a PhD student at Harvard University, first in physics, then in mathematics, then in computer science, then in artificial intelligence. And at that point, the Harvard faculty lost patience with him and threw him out of the PhD program. And he came over to MIT. He worked with Marvin Minsky and joined the faculty. Many of you, again, know that the work that Fisher did on the pricing of options was the subject of a Nobel Prize that wasn't awarded to him because he had died at the time. You have to be living to receive the Nobel Prize. What I hope you also know about Fisher is just his extraordinary intelligence. When I meet alumni who had a course with him, they just are still in awe years later about the experience of being in the room with an intellect that great. Fisher Black also is someone who cared about practice. He worked at the Rand Corporation, he worked at Arthur D. Little Consulting, as well as serving as a professor at MIT Sloan. And the third, the bottom picture in this group is, as you know, Professor Robert Merton. Bob Merton received his PhD from MIT in economics. His dissertation advisor was Paul Samuelson. And he immediately joined the MIT Sloan faculty. And for the next year, the next 18 years, from 1970 to 1988, he developed what's now known as continuous time finance. That work, together with Fisher Black and Myron Scholes, on option pricing especially, was again the subject of a Nobel Prize awarded in 1997. It was a sad day for MIT Sloan for Course 15, when in 1988, Bob Merton left for Harvard Business School. When we talk about these legends, and when I talk to alumni about their sense of those legends, it's often with a little bit of anxiety. It's understandable that our alums want to know, are we as great now as we were then? Is a distinct purpose for Course 15 still at the heart of what we do? And even if it is, will the best students, faculty, and companies gather around MIT Sloan? You know, in 1988, Myron Scholes had already left for the University of Chicago. Franco Modigliani was still on the faculty, but he was 70 years old. Stu Myers and John Cox were still here. But people were worried. MIT had arrived in finance and in these other areas by the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. But it was fair to wonder if the future would be as bright. Now in 1988, the finance group had hired away a young faculty member from the Wharton School, whose name was Andrew Lowe. So there was reason to hope, but that gets us a little ahead of the story. So what I'd like to do, again for just a few minutes, is to touch on this sense of our faculty today. And I want to suggest to you that the people that we just talked about, they are legends, they're giants. The faculty we have now are giants of the same magnitude. They're not people standing in the shadow of giants. They're giants themselves. So let me start with the same three categorizations, beginning with mathematics and operations. And a great place to begin, I think, is with Professor John Sterman. So John was a student of J. Forrester at MIT Sloan in system dynamics. John took the understanding of complex systems into the understanding of climate change. In particular, how people in the public sector, people in business leadership positions, and the public at large understand or don't understand some of the elements and aspects of climate change. John is the one person at the failed climate change summit in Copenhagen in 2009, telling the truth, as was known at that time, about the country's proposals, the proposals from the various countries. What would they honestly, actually, truthfully do, at least to carbon emissions, and based on the science of the time, the sea level rise, to temperature change, and so on. People willing to tell complex truths, sometimes unpopular truths, are always the people that we've revered at MIT Sloan. If we move on to Professor Roberto Rigobon. People know Roberto Rigobon, a few of you here. So Roberto Rigobon has developed a new approach to measuring inflation, country by country, item by item, every day. Known as the Billion Prices Project, it relies on the prices that retailers post online every day. This approach to inflation is unsurprisingly, actually, if you can pull it off, much more accurate than countries' reported inflation statistics. It's changed the way inflation not only is measured, but the way that inflation is managed. And as some of you probably know, his findings have shown that in one particular country, the actual rate of inflation is over twice what that country's government says that it is. That country's government has offered to put Roberto in prison should he set foot in that country. And to try to add a little bit of credibility to that threat, the country has imprisoned economists who downloaded Rigobon's data. Moving on, Professor Tavneet Suri is the leading expert on the way that technological innovation drives economic development in sub-Saharan Africa. From Kenya to Zambia, from the Ivory Coast to Sierra Leone and beyond, she's the person who's shown how food prices change when, for the first time, a country builds a system of secondary roads. How innovations in water distribution technology change agricultural production. And how a new system of cell phone-based mobile money changes household finances and household risk-taking in countries where there's no functioning traditional banking system. Each of these people aren't just smart people working on important problems. They have opened up new areas of inquiry. And if you look at the other areas, you see the same kind of pattern. In social sciences and humanities, we're proud to claim Professor Fiona Murray. She is a person who has been a leader in understanding the way that big science, scientific findings, are often, but not always, turned into new inventions. And from there, into new innovative products and services, and sometimes, yes, into new ventures. And for her leadership, MIT President Raphael Reif, just a couple months ago, appointed her the co-director of MIT's new innovation initiative, bringing in particular Course 15, the Sloan School, more closely aligned with the School of Engineering, something very important as we remember the original vision for MIT. We also celebrate Professor Yesheng Wang. Yesheng is among the world's leaders in understanding economic development in Asia. As the author of Capitalism with Chinese Characteristics, he is the person with detailed records province by province who showed the extraordinary role that local entrepreneurs played in the growth of China. It's literally the case that the record books, the history books about the Chinese economic miracle were rewritten based on Yesheng's findings. And last, we celebrate Peter Senge. Peter is the founder of the discipline of organizational learning. He's the person who coined the phrase, the learning organization. And Peter's academic basis was again built at MIT. His PhD was in systems modeling from Course 15. Lastly, I want to touch on the way that finance and economics has been reinvented at Sloan. In 2007, there was anxiety about the future of the finance group. Only a couple people had gotten tenure in the last decade. We didn't have a lot of young scholars. We did have, as you see here, Professor Antoinette Shore, who is the natural heir apparent to Stu Myers in corporate finance. And the finance group at Sloan also had Leonid Kogan. So Leonid is a mathematical finance person, an heir apparent, if you like, to Bob Merton. Fortunately, Course 15 also had a person in the applied economics group who was a thoughtful and brave scholar of financial systems, Professor Simon Johnson. In 2007, just before the crisis, when Simon was on leave from MIT as chief economist of the International Monetary Fund, he was going around saying publicly, 30 times leverage is too much leverage for the US banks, and 62 times leverage is too much leverage for the European banks, trying to keep up with the American banks. And both sets of bankers got him invited to return to MIT. How great is it? How great is it to have people with the courage of well-founded convictions? We also had, as I mentioned, Professor Andrew Lowe, who by 2007 had come to a place in his own personal and professional development where he was ready to lead the finance group, and the finance group was ready to be led by him to reinvent itself. They developed the Master of Finance program to rededicate themselves to cutting-edge finance in research, to producing finance research that the world needs and wants, and teaching more students who would be leaders that the world needs in this area. The group hired Deborah Lucas from Kellogg, who had been the chief economist of the US Congressional Budget Office, to expand the ability of the school to speak meaningfully to public policy issues in finance. And she's been leading the development of Sloan's new Center for Finance and Policy. The group also hired another senior person with an MIT pedigree, a PhD from MIT, Jonathan Parker. Jonathan is the person who recreates the legacy of Franco Modigliani. He's the world's leader in the way that households and individuals plan their financial activities. Seeing this development led Bob Merton 2 years ago to quietly call Andrew Lowe and call me and ask if it would be okay if he would retire from Harvard Business School and return home to MIT. We said yes. He did have two demands. He wanted to help with the Center for Finance and Policy, and we said yes. And he wanted to teach lots of MIT Sloan students, and we said yes. I don't know if we were ever away, but we are back. And I hope it seems to you as it does to me that the people we've just now been talking about are a fitting fulfillment of the legacy left by the leaders that we were touching on earlier. I mentioned our students just a few minutes ago. I'd like briefly to tell you just a few things about the school's activities of the moment in other areas, and then look at the future again very briefly. This is, but I'm not going to put it to a vote, a great time to be a student at MIT Sloan School. The world at large sees it that way, since applications for the MBA program at Sloan are up over 50% during the last 5 years, and no other leading school can say that. We have 11 applicants for every seat in the class. Only one other leading school can say that, that's Stanford. 3 of the last 5 years, our students have led all other peer schools in job offers at graduation from the MBA program. This is honestly a great time for MIT Sloan, for the Course 15. This is also an important time to reinvest in some of those fundamental distinctions for Course 15 that we talked about earlier. This year, we're reinvesting in the Course 15 undergraduate program with new courses for the major and minor, and a new minor in entrepreneurship between the Sloan School, Course 15, and the School of Engineering. This is also important for us. We have a new executive MBA program for senior executives that's the domestic complement to the Sloan Fellows program. The first professional master's program offered by the Sloan School. It's also been a great time to reinvent our physical facilities. I know that many of you, as alumni, have had a chance to come back to E62, the new home of the Sloan School. No marble, no mahogany. It's not a Taj Mahal on the Charles. I think it's a great design. I love the way that there is energy in the lobby, in the gathering spaces, and that the classrooms are exactly what we need in order to do our work. And over the next 18 months, we're completing a total renovation of E52, the Sloan building, to give us the physical home that we need. We've also, with these new academic programs, been able to grow the Sloan faculty when other schools have not been able to grow, and we've been able to attract extraordinary people. We're always selective in who we hire. Last year, we made 11 offers to people to join the Sloan faculty. Of those 11 people offered the chance, the number who took us up on it was 11, every one of them. You know, in the prospectus, it says past performance is not necessarily a guarantee of, but it was a great year. And in alumni activity, we've been increasing our engagement with events like the one tonight. My first year as dean, we did 9 alumni events. This year, we will do 90. And the leaders in our external relations group, many of whom are here tonight, are the reason we're able to do events like this that we simply couldn't do before. We knew that we needed to expand our outreach because the strength of the network is important, and we knew that our alumni were proud, they're loyal, but they weren't connected in the ways that they needed to be. We also knew that if we reached out better, alums would support us better, and they have. Giving to the school's annual fund over the last 7 years has increased by over 80%. No other leading school can say that. We're still not where we need to be, but we are very far along the path, and I'm very grateful to so many of you in the room for helping us get there. The future is harder to predict, and that's why it's the future. There are some things that are easy, though, to say. We know we need to continue to grow our outreach to alums, and we will. We know that we need to continue to be MIT's School of Management, to be distinct. Those aspects of learning by doing, action learning, have to be a cornerstone of what adds value and what makes us distinct. And we are continuing to reinvest in those areas. In the aspects of knowledge creation and impact, it's harder to predict exactly what the faculty will do. If I tell them to do something, they do the opposite, and so you know that that doesn't really work. But we do have a chance to choose, and we have a chance to applaud those who are doing exactly what we hope. As this academic year began, we had a plenary session of all of the school's faculty and staff where I talked about some of the legacy from the founding of MIT, from the beginning of Course 15. Talked about some of the faculty that you've seen here tonight and some others as well. People who are reinventing healthcare systems to be efficient and financially sustainable. People who are figuring out the ways that a company in this era of big data and the digital economy needs to change to be a data-driven enterprise. And people who, in the realms of finance, are helping to create sustainable, resilient financial systems around the world and helping to bring capital to the human needs where that capital is especially important. Opening up new areas of inquiry is still the task that MIT's faculty set for themselves. Discontinuous innovation is still the badge of honor. I think William Barton Rogers, Francis Amasa Walker, and Davis Dewey would be proud. I hope you're proud too.